Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of Luke's Gospel. And we're in Luke chapter 6. We're still studying the Sermon on the Plain. We're coming to the end. Towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, "Don't judge lest you be judged." And then he uses the image of the guy with the speck in his eye. Um, that's not called a parable, but it is. The whole business of the blind leading the blind, that is called a parable. And of course, Matthew 7 and Luke 6 both end with the parable of the wise and foolish builders. We're going to be looking at 6:41 through 44 today. What Jesus says about speck in your eye, which is such a brilliant way of describing everything, is delivered in with the same thoughts to communicate the same truth, although the words are a little different. So let's read Luke chapter 6, verses 41 through 44. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye and not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me take that speck that is in your eye," when you yourself do not see you have a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of that is in your brother's eye. For there is no good tree which produces bad fruit, nor, on the other hand, a bad tree which produces good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush. Okay. Um, it's worded a little differently, but these two thoughts are contiguous in the Sermon on the Mount as well. And the whole speck in your eye. It's such a brilliant image. It's humor in the first place, and Luke gives us instances of Jesus' use of humor. Now, I don't mean jokes. I mean saying something slant, saying something with irony or even sarcasm to make a point, saying it in absurdity to illustrate the absurdity of the things we accept as normal in a sinful world. That Jesus does, and he does in Luke's gospel. In Luke chapter 13, we're going to see in a few weeks um, when Jesus is warned not to go into Perea because Herod's looking to kill him. He says, "Go tell that fox I'm going to go where I want to go, and there's nothing he can do about it. I'm going to die in Jerusalem. Everybody knows prophets only die in Jerusalem." Well, it's not historically accurate that prophets only die in Jerusalem. But that statement is extreme and it's sarcastic. Sarcastic in that it is the most pointed, barbed way to speak a truth. And Jesus does that. And he does it on every page, or even does it in every gospel, but he does it there. And Luke tells us that he at times used humor in that way. So this is absurdist humor, but it's not broad humor. In other words, it's not a guy slipping on a banana peel, but it is the old banana in your ear joke. You know, guy is walking around with a banana in his ear. Another guy comes up and says, "Hey, buddy, you got a banana in your ear." "What?" "Hey, buddy, you got a banana in your ear." "What?" "Hey, you've got a banana in your ear." And he goes, "I can't hear you. I got a banana in my ear." Okay, it's that kind of a tale. You got a guy who has a plank sticking out of his eye socket. And he goes to the next guy and say, "Hey, let me help you get that speck out of your eye." It's such an absurd image to conjure up in your head. And yet it is common practice. It is, how many times do we want to say, pot meet kettle, you know? And how many times are we guilty of being the pot or the kettle, accusing the other of being something that we ourselves are not, when we are more so than they are? And the thing that's even more brilliant about this is the fact that if you have a speck in your eye, you can't do anything else until you get that speck out of your eye. People don't, I mean, if you have a hangnail, you can go on and about your business. I mean, and maybe it'll bug you before you, if you have a blister on your toe, you can make accommodation for that and go about your day until it heals up. If you had a speck in your eye, you're doing nothing else until you get the speck out of your eye. You are incapacitated until it is fixed. And so having a speck in your eye is not nothing. It's a great big something, especially when we have the theme of sight and seeing things clearly in both sermons. However, we can't help someone if we haven't removed the plank from our own eye. I said a couple of sessions ago that the Jewish notion of perfection was not flawlessness, but completeness, which doesn't mean our Father in heaven has any flaws, because he doesn't. But there is an understanding that we humans are never going to be perfect. Jesus didn't say, take the speck out of your eye before you help your brother. He said, take the plank out of your eye before you help your brother. Though you kind of have to take the speck out of your own eye as well. You're in no position to help unless you see to yourself first, as Paul told Timothy multiple times. Look to yourself. Keep your own house in order, your own heart clean, your own eyes on the road, so that you can help the rest of the folks there. And that's such a vivid image that Jesus gives us, because we do have a responsibility to help the brother with the speck in his eye. That's the thing. When he says, don't judge lest you be judged, he's not saying everything goes. He's saying, don't be a hypocrite about things. That's what he's saying. Because we do have a responsibility to each other to help each other with the specks that are in our eyes. We just have to be in a position to help. And we can't if we're not honest about ourselves, to ourselves, if we're not self-aware. Okay. Well, next time we're going to pick up with verse 45, and we'll look at that. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.